All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and today is Thursday, September 20th. Micron out with earnings after the close. Really nice numbers that came in. So they beat pretty decisively for the quarter. Let's see if I still have their numbers up. Let's see, Micron. The last I saw, I did not see the guidance. They may put that out in the call, but their numbers, the fourth quarter numbers, 353 versus 333 and 844 versus 825, a real nice beat there. Yeah, like I said, I don't see the first quarter guidance, but the stock having a nice reaction there. Keep in mind, we designed a long trade. I did not put this trade on for any big material size, but I thought the 50-day moving average, the 200-day moving average, in the bottom of value would act as a little bit of resistance. So I have a call spread going up until that 50. So we'll see how high it gets after hours, but that's a little bit of the icing on the cake today. Geez, what a huge move today. So I'll bring up S&P. If you watched yesterday's video, you heard me whine a little bit about how it's been this week. It's been pretty much a zero-sum game in terms of sectors, right? We've seen this rotate. The big word has been rotation this week, where we've seen one sector after another. Defense stocks earlier in the week, industrials earlier in the week. Yesterday was finance. By the way, those defense names, you've had to be pretty quick. Those crumbled pretty hard today. So I don't have any positions in any of those. I talked about how I was disciplined and got out of my LMT trade right at the VPOC, and I'll show you this again before we get into this. I always get sidetracked, so don't worry, I will go over the indices. But right there, that was my target the whole time, right up at 341. What are these things? Version point of controls. It's amazing how well they work. As my screen is adjusting now, you don't see them, but they should come back here in a second. But they work exceptionally well in regards to price has a memory, right? Where a lot of buyers and sellers have met up previously. They often are sticking points, and that's just how institutional traders trade. From coming from the institutional world and trading at Bank of America Merrill Lynch for a number of years, I could tell you that hedge funds have sticking points where they care at certain levels, and they say, hey, if the price ever gets back to this level, I would sell. And so that's some of what goes on with those levels. But I use that to my advantage. That's why it's one of the few proprietary indicators that I use. But it works exceptionally well. And LMT is another example. And I point out one of these almost every video about Virgin point of controls, where it's basically like a gap unfilled, right? Price never reached this level. And it remains active until price actually comes back and fills it. All right, so that's not what I was going to start with, but I think a good point. But yeah, you've had to be really quick to see some of these moves. So it was the financials yesterday, and they had a carry through day today. And some of the growth areas saw money being taken out of. Today was different. Everything went up. So we haven't had, so today was not a zero-sum game. I don't think, just looking at the worst performing groups, there was not many, right? And this is, traditionally how it is. I've got just a couple of things that were red on my screen, but the majority of areas performed really well. So enjoy it, because these days, I hope we get more of them. I don't have a crystal ball, but I know that over the last, months, plus, we don't get many days where everything participates very well. So before I go into the technicals and before I go into today's option activity, strategy is so important if you are trading options. If you are trading stock, stock is a different animal than options. You can make adjustments quicker. There's a lot more tolerance. With options, it's it's trading on steroids. You have to be very quick. You have to make some decisions very fast. You have to lock in profits. You have to make decisions whether or not you're going to roll things. So all of these types of things we go over at Tribeca Trade Group and through our market session as well as our midday session, I try to give as much strategy about what I'm doing. And, so an example is JP Morgan. Right, I went into October options yesterday in JP Morgan, and for a day trade, and it was a huge winner. I got in right at the beginning of the day. I had an alert set, which I went over in yesterday's video, and then at the end of the day, I said, "Hey, I'm going to take my profits." I think I bought calls for like 45 cents. They went up to $1.05, and I said, "Hey, I still think this trade has more to go." How confident am I? Not crazy confident, but I want to play something that I think could have a day or two of momentum. So I got that. Was up another $1 today, and I rolled my October calls yesterday, and I put them into January, and then today I got out of the January options. That's perfect. I bought those for 3, and I was able to get out at around 415, 420. The very last piece I think at 390. But, that's perfect. Could JP Morgan go up further from here? Sure. But it's got to get through this resistance. Kind of had a doji today. So let's not be greedy. Kramer had if you didn't get a chance to watch Kramer's show yesterday, it was one of those reruns where he talks about strategy. And again, strategy is so important. And one of the things that he says is bulls can make money, bears can make money, but pigs get slaughtered. So, you don't want to be very greedy, especially with option positions, right? You want to leave a last piece on, which I didn't do that today in JP Morgan. I was happy with the money that I made in 2 separate trades, but I think very important and a great show that you could catch that he gave on strategy. He gave a bunch of other points that I thought were very valuable, but let's keep the video rolling. So that's S&P, very beautiful breakout here, up 90 basis points. And also, we were bid up pretty much pre-market, and we held, which has not been easy as well. Nasdaq was the outperformer of the day, up 1.2%. So right where it needed to bounce. This was also something I talked about in yesterday's video that, hey, it's got to bounce here. And it did that pretty decisively today, which is great. And it's amazing how this market will do that. Small caps also, they were actually rallying a little bit after hours, but also where they needed to hold, they bounced pretty decently. Now, I had a small cap trade on that I bailed on yesterday, so I am not perfect in all of my trades. I thought that I would have better opportunities in some other things. Look at the Dow today, back to the January highs. So that doesn't look like a new high, but pretty darn near close. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about a couple other trades. The dollar getting weaker, also just kind of freeing up some, I don't know, feels like freeing up some excess capacity, right? We saw a lot of other things rally. I got out of my DXJ position today. This was Japan. Nice to be making some money. And again, why did I get out of it? Because I'm using exactly what I mentioned, just like I did with Lockheed Martin. We got a VPOC up here, right? So it's rallied pretty nicely up to here. Let's not be greedy. I got into some calls just 2 days ago for 60 cents. I think it was 2 or 3 days ago. I may be getting my days confused, but out today at $1. I mean, that's huge profit in just 2 days. I'm happy with that. Move on to the next trade. All right, so a couple next trades, and let's see where to start with. Let's hit biotech. We'll talk a little bit about biotech, but this is a nice signal. Again, IBB is large cap biotech. It's market cap weighted, so the larger names are bigger. Much different than some of the other ETFs out there. I've talked a lot about PSCH, for example, which may need one more day. Almost triggered a long, but this is small cap healthcare, which is up over, I think, 40% year to date. IBB is completely different set of stocks. But this looks pretty constructive. Real nice move out above the value area, getting above this prior resistance. I like it. One name that we got into today, and a name that we've seen option activity the last couple days, has been Allergan. Nice move here. My target, where'd that sucker go? Oh, maybe not. Maybe there's no VPOC there. But Yeah, so here's another one that was taken out, by the way. This would be really fun, but this is far away. You remember, it kind of acts like magnets. So the closer you are to it, the more it could suck you in. But this is still far away, so I would say it's got a low magnetic force to that one. But really nice. A few other names, then, start to look at, what's really interesting is sometimes this group gets out of favor for a little bit, but buyers seem to gravitate back to whenever there's a dip in this. So IGV was up 83 basis points. That's an inside day there. But if you kind of look across the group, I think we talked a little bit about Salesforce. Salesforce had a nice day. A couple other names in this group. Okta saw some calls today, January calls. This is really nice in my opinion, right? You have a gap up. I'll zoom in here a little bit. A gap up, and it kind of settled down here, and it reclaimed the short-term moving averages today. So there's your signal for that. It did not get much, far, so the earnings gap held. So I like this. I added a small trade in this today. Sticking with this group, what is this? ACXM, right? Another application software name. Now this one's in a full-out breakout. This is this is a different chart, but look at what they did today. Bring up some of today's option activity, and two big spreads that they put on. A lot of A's, by the way. A lot of activity in the A's today. Whoops, what happened here? Excel not responding. So anyway, they purchased a couple spreads out in November. November 50-60 call spread, and then a separate trade, which was the 55-60 call spread in ACXM. So this is full-on breakout mode, and I think call spreads are a great way to play that type of a trade. Another name, Splunk. Now this saw close to the end of the day. But this is also right at the earnings gap, right? It's given back this whole move and sitting right back here. So I like the Okta chart a little bit better than this one. I don't think this is providing any buy signal yet, but they're buying a lot of short-term options. They bought not this week's, but next week's options. They also bought the October 5th options as well in Splunk, right? So it does appear that buyers are coming back into this group. Some other areas that saw some call buying. I thought this was interesting. Monster. Let me go back to the A's for a minute. AXTA, which saw call activity yesterday. More calls today. This is a coding company. Keep an eye on this name. Now, it may not fit your system yet. $31, I think, above that 200-day moving average is probably something for me. The way I filter trades is probably something to watch. So, what I do sometimes like this, when we see just a ton of option activity and repeat activity, sometimes I start a position, right? I won't take a full position because it doesn't meet my criteria. And that's what it's all about. It's all about your system. You could use option activity to help you, but it's not going to be the end-all, be-all, right? I will give you an example of something that there's a lot of good ideas that you can get from option activity. There's a lot of bad ones too. There's not always good traders who are trading this stuff. VMware, we caught this trade the morning of this, right? And where did the calls go up in this name? Right up here. Right, and since then, if you follow that option activity, you would be in big trouble, right? So you have to have your own system because just because there's aggressive, and those VMware options that went up a couple days ago were aggressive as it comes, but it doesn't mean just because it's aggressive it's going to work. So again, it's all about having your own system. It's all about managing your risk, and if it doesn't work, getting out so that it's not a big loss, right? Small losers and big winners. That's a whole part of the game. A few other names that saw some call activity. Like I mentioned Splunk. We saw a couple names, semiconductor names that saw some calls as well. But anyway, the videos, I always try to cut the video off at 15 minutes. So that's it. I think for tomorrow is quadruple witching. So anything could kind of goes. I would think that you will see not crazy moves, but there was some head scratcher moves this week. Remember what's going on with Google, Facebook, Netflix. They're all being taken out of ETFs. The Google and the Facebook are coming out of XLK, and they're going into XLC, the new communication sector. Same thing with Netflix and Comcast, and I think Disney are also coming out of consumer discretionary, XLY, and they're going into XLC, right? So, that's part of the reason why some of those names have been struggling a little bit. That rebalance takes place, I believe, tomorrow, but all the pre-positioning that happens for that, and granted, shares have to be sold for that rebalance because XLC is a much smaller ETF in terms of assets that are following it versus XLK and XLY. But all that pre-positioning, people do that. The actual event happens tomorrow, but the way that institutions and portfolio desks handles that is once the announcement is made leading up to it, it's all traded ahead of to try to game that trade. And then at the very end of the day, they're actually at the end of the week when the event happens, they're actually unwinding a lot of what they pre-traded. So anyway, we'll talk more about that in the trading room tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow.